We have some breaking news. The Toronto Maple Leafs have made an interesting signing Kiefer Bellows to a full-time contract. So we'll break that down in this episode of Leafs Digest. As well, Sheldon Keefe, he has revealed the official goaltender for tonight, and a lot of Leafs fans might not like it. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. Before we do, quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. We are on the road to 6,000. We are very close, so scroll down. 80% of you guys aren't subscribed, and if you aren't already, hit that button. It means the world to me and Darius. All right, Darius, let's just get right into it. The Leafs have made a sneaky signing today, and a guy we've been talking about a little bit. He's kind of flown under the radar for some people, but it is Kiefer Bellows, and I wasn't really expecting this. I haven't really been expecting much of the news that's come out lately, but there's been a lot of it, and you can see from the Toronto Maple Leafs, we've signed Kiefer Bellows to an AHL contract for the remainder of the 2023-2024 season. Darius, this is actually interesting. He was on a PTO for a very long time, and now they officially signed him for the rest of the season to see how he's performing. I'll get into his performance in a minute, but do you have any initial thoughts on this deal? I'm all for it. He's performed unbelievably for the Marlies, and I think he could actually be some sort of interesting piece going forward for the Maple Leafs as well.
I think going forward, he's a very interesting piece, and I like the fact that they locked him up just to keep him in the organization. I don't know if he would have went anywhere else after the PTO, because obviously it's up. The PTO is 25 games. Apparently, you can sign another 25-game PTO, but anyway, nonetheless, they signed him to an NHL contract. They keep him in the organization with the Marlies. I wouldn't call him up to the NHL yet. I mean, he struggled at the NHL level before. He is a first-round pick to the New York Islanders. In the 2016 draft, so the same draft as Austin Matthews. But he's had a rough ride, like I mentioned. But the talent is there, and I think he's starting to find it at the AHL level. They're finally giving him a chance to just kind of do his thing down there. And I mean, it's paying off. Like you said, you're going to get into the stats, but real quick, like 26 points in 25 games at the AHL level is good. This is a good player. And I think going forward, they might have found like a hidden gem, a guy who can come in and play third line minutes and score a couple of nice goals for them. So we'll see where it goes in the future. But for right now, I'm glad that they locked him up. They're keeping him in the Marlies for the rest of the year. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and we've seen it before. A lot of players start off poor, whether they're a high draft pick or whatever, and then pick it up later on in their career. And it's good that the Toronto Maple Leafs, or in this case, I guess the Marlies right now, have him, and the Maple Leafs have the potential if he breaks out. He is still only 25 years old. You mentioned, you can see the stats here. He has 26 points in 25 games, 14 goals. Struggled at the NHL level with the Islanders, but he was a former top 20 pick the same year as Austin Matthews, like you mentioned. And I mean, if he ends up breaking out, and if he continues playing like this and gets it to the and can translate that to the NHL level, I mean, we may have found maybe a third liner of the future, depending on how he goes going forward. And this is very solid. You can see Nick Brown here saying again, he signs it to a 1-year deal. It is only 1 year, which ends at the end of the season. And Kiefer Bellows had to say, I feel like there's more to my game that can also grow, which makes sense. He's still a young guy, and not very often you get a young guy like this, a former top pick on your team for what was nothing. We just got him for a PTO, so I'm pretty excited about it. Any quick final thoughts on this? I'm actually pretty happy that they did this. I didn't expect it right now. I figured they'd give him another PTO and then see how he plays, but I mean, he still definitely deserves it. It's going to be interesting to see at the end of the year what they do with him, whether they sign him to an NHL deal or I guess re-up with the Marlies, or maybe he'll get other interests around the NHL. Who knows?
I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the year. I don't see them, including him in a trade or anything like that. I think there's other trade chips they have. I think they're really trying to work on him as like a project player. So I'm excited to see what he continues to do the rest of the year. He's a point of game player. I want to see him continue to do that, and then we can reevaluate kind of in the summer, right, and see where he's at, and if he gets a two-way contract, something like that. But I think he's way too good for a PTO.
Yeah.
I'm glad he got his deal done in the AHL. So we'll just keep an eye on him, see how he does. But I think that could be something kind of brewing there in the AHL for the Leafs going forward.
Yeah, I think as we look into the next couple of years, this guy might be one that we look back on this video a year or two later and be like, wow, this was a big signing for him. And speaking of, I guess not big signing, but a pretty big move here for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's time for us to kind of have a discussion on this. Sheldon Keefe came out. We knew a couple days ago that Ilya Samsonov or Martin Jones wasn't going to start again. Brutal loss yesterday, by the way, but let's just ignore that for the time being. He came out and basically said a lot of things. There's a bunch of screenshots here, but from Ilya Freeman, Ilya Samsonov does get the start tonight versus Detroit. The game's pushed back half an hour because of weather in Detroit or something like that. Darius, it is Samsonov. I was kind of hoping it would be Dennis Hill to be just for viewing pleasure, but it is going to be Ilya Samsonov. Do you have any quick thoughts before I get into what Sheldon Keefe said, as well as some other interesting things for tonight's game? But Samsonov is back already, and they must trust what he did in his brief Marlies time, I guess.
Tonight's game has the potential to be insane, like absolutely wild. Detroit is still stuck in Detroit at the time we're filming this video. The game got pushed back, like you mentioned. Samson was playing his first game after the whole debacle being sent down. We don't know what he has. He didn't even play a game with the Marlies. The team is pissed off as they should be after that terrible loss. Like it's brutal loss. That might be the worst loss of the season so far. So I'm excited to see what they do. Being a little bit pissed off. When you're pissed off, I think you tend to play more aggressive and better. And the fact that that's going to happen in front of Samsonov might actually help him. But let's just hope he helps the team. I think it's interesting to say that I have confidence in him. Would be a lie because based on what we've seen so far, why would you, right? But I do, I'm still in the camp where I believe that he can find it, right? And I just want to see him take that next step tonight to show us, yeah, okay, it's still there and we can kind of rely on him going forward. Martin Jones has been great, but it'd be great if you had three great goalies as well. So I guess we just have to see what he brings us tonight.
Yeah, yesterday was was really bad, and I mean, you mentioned it. This has the potential to be a really bad game. If Samsonov has a horrible start after having a horrible collapse yesterday, Martin Jones is still playing well. He's starting to slow down a little bit, whether that's because of the amount of games played, whatever it is. But this is what Sheldon Keefe said. He says Ilya Samsonov has, quote, done the work, and we've got to give him a chance to get back in and see if there's been any sort of progress. It's a bigger decision than just me or Curtis. You've got a guy who's been our number one goalie, our highest paid goalie, and you got our top prospect in Hildeby. It's an organizational thing. You go through all the different pros and cons of the whole thing. And quite honestly, depending on how this start goes tonight, we might have another whole video on that quote there because that's a big, interesting one. And then also some things to notice that Mark Giordano is scratched tonight. Connor Timmins will come in. Says they're waiting on the status of another injury. The Leafs right now are in kind of shambles. Giordano has been really bad since coming back. Connor Timmins now gets the start. They had a brutal loss yesterday. And now we have Ilya Samsonov getting back in the net at the worst possible time. And we haven't really heard anything on Joseph Wall. I'm assuming, again, after the All-Star break. Darius, it is not a great time. Do you have any thoughts on the quote where it basically says that, quote, he's done the work and we've got to give him a chance to get back and see if there's been any sort of progress? That is a non-confidence quote if I've seen one. This is like basically they're saying Martin Jones can't keep running him out every day, and Dennis Hildeby, they want to protect their top prospect, which is ultimately, I don't really know why they called him up in the first place if they weren't going to use him, but that is what it is. Do you have any quick thoughts on this? This is a bad situation, and it's rough for the Maple Leafs, specifically with their brutal losses. He had another one a couple games ago as well.
Yeah, like you said, Keefe is like coming out and saying it without saying it, right? He's using like a lot of words to just hide it without actually saying it, but there's no confidence there. And what he's saying is true though. They have to see what they see in Samsonov. They have to just see what it is. They don't know what it is, right? We don't know what it is. He didn't get to play with the Marlies at all, right? But if he's put in the work, he's put in the work. We don't know exactly what's wrong with him. We're just speculating it's mental. It probably is. We don't know exactly what, he was working on with the Marlies. The organization knows better than we do if he's ready to come back up. If he wasn't ready to, take this start, then I don't know if they would call him back up. They talk all the time, GM and coach. So I have a feeling that, they talked it over. This wasn't just a thing that they're forcing Keefe to do. And if it is, then I think that's ridiculous. Like I don't think Keefe has to do anything he doesn't want to, right? So if he wanted to start Martin Jones, I guess he would. But anyway, all of that to say, I don't know if he has, like we say, like why would you ever have confidence in Samsonov right now? There's no reason to, right? So it's going to be a really interesting game because they keep talking up, okay, he did the work, he's back. I'm just interested to see, what's going to happen. The body language thing is a huge thing. And I see it on a couple of guys on the team. Like you said, like the team's kind of in shambles right now. And I believe that's the case just because of body language, a couple of guys on the team. And Samsonov is one of those guys, like they just got to get it together. And to touch on one last thing, like you mentioned, Mark Giordano not playing. He's had a rough last two games. I think sitting him, I don't know if he's injured. I don't want to speculate anything, but sitting him might be good just to get that mental focus back in. But yeah, the last two games have been a little rough for him. So we'll see what Connor Timmins has tonight.
Yeah, and hopefully the Leafs can get a win after being up 3-0 yesterday against the Avalanche and collapsing in Leafs fashion. But that'll wrap it up. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on all this stuff. It's an interesting time to be a fan. And at the very least, we got Kiefer Bellows signed to a full-time deal. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you later.